You had it was PDD 35, the PDD 35 process, the ability to set priorities across the government for the collection of intelligence. But as you just described with regard to the millennium, when you had warning that something was going to occur or might occur, the NSC had the ability to surge, to bring everyone to the table many times a week, often many times a day, to break through the barriers among the different agencies, including the big barrier that you have adverted to, the barrier between domestic and foreign intelligence. So this is my question to you. Absent the kind of structural reform that you have suggested and others have suggested, where you literally tear down the wall between domestic and foreign collection and put someone in control of both, what is the role of the National Security Council in breaking through those barriers in a period of heightened warning, as we had when Director Tenet made his statements in February of '01 that we're in a crisis period and need to be at our most wary? What is the proper role of the National Security Council in those circumstances?
I think that to think about it, you have to think about the two different roles that the NSC generally plays, which is one, the overall sort of policy coordination and policy setting process, and the other is what I would call a crisis management function. Both of them are critical, but they're very different. The policy-making process is a deliberative process. It tries to set long-term goals and priorities, tries to look at, how you meld the different claims on time and resources, and tries to think forward in a proactive way about what needs to be done. It brings everybody to the table, but and the debates are important, and they provide guidance for the decisions that agencies are going to make and to reconcile conflicting claims. But inevitably, those things don't touch on the operational side, and for the day-to-day operations, we do rely on the agencies. One of the reasons why I think where we are now, I believe we should strengthen the role of the Secretary of DHS is because I think for many of the day-to-day responsibilities of Homeland Security, it would be important to have a cabinet-level operational official who is accountable and responsible for these set of activities, and that responsibility should not reside at the NSC. However, for crisis management, and this is as true for dealing with crises abroad as it is with this particular crisis, there are times in which you need to accelerate and intensify the focus of actors around a problem that requires high-level decisions and doing not business as usual. However good the business as usual is, and business as usual can be quite good. I'm not meaning to disparage it. And there is a function there in which the NSC process continues to focus attention and make sure that timely information is brought to the table, decisions are being made in a timely way, and there's an ability to review the way those decisions are being implemented. But just as though we've talked about this as being a war, this is not an acute war. It has acute phases where we have particularly heightened periods of warning. But it is simply unsustainable to think that we're going to solve the problem by having the NSC principals meet every day to deal with this challenge. There are other things they have to do, and we need to build a system that can embody, as part of its business as usual, a better way of handling this, understanding that in periods of crisis we're going to have to surge and use this mechanism of crisis management in the NSC to deal with these extremely heightened periods.
In the post-9/11 world, threats are defined more by the fault lines within societies than by territorial boundaries between them. From terrorism to global disease on environmental degradation, the challenges have become transnational rather than international. That is the defining quality of the world politics in the 21st century. National security used to be considered by studying foreign frontiers, weighing opposing groups of states, and measuring industrial might. To be dangerous, an enemy had to muster large armies. Threats emerged slowly, often visibly. As weapons were forged, armies conscripted, and units trained and moved into place. Because large states were more powerful, they had more to lose. They could be deterred. Now threats can emerge quickly. An organization like Al-Qaeda, headquartered in a country on the other side of the earth, in a region so poor that electricity or telephones were scarce, could nonetheless scheme to wield weapons of unprecedented destructive power in the largest cities of the United States. In this sense, 9/11 has taught us that terrorism against American interest over there should be regarded just as we regard terrorism against America over here. In the same sense, the American homeland is the planet. But the enemy is not just terrorism or some generic evil. This vagueness blurs the strategy. The catastrophic threat at this moment in history is more specific. It is the threat posed by Islamist terrorism, especially the Al Qaeda network, its affiliates, and its ideology. As we mentioned in Chapter 2 of the 9/11 Commission report, Osama bin Laden and other Islamist leaders drew on a long tradition of extreme intolerance within one stream of Islam, a minority tradition, from at least Ibn Taymiyyah, through the founders of Wahhabism, through the Muslim Brotherhood, to Sayyid Qutb. That stream is motivated by religion. It does not distinguish politics from religion, thus distorting both. It is further fed by grievances stressed by bin Laden and widely felt throughout the Muslim world against the U.S. military presence in the Middle East, policies perceived as anti-Arab and anti-Muslim, and support of Israel. Bin Laden and Islamist terrorists mean exactly what they say. To them, America is the front of all evil, the head of the snake, and it must be converted or destroyed. It is not a position with which Americans can bargain with or negotiate. With it, there is no common ground, not even respect for life, on which to begin a dialogue. It can only be destroyed or utterly isolated. Because the Muslim world has fallen behind the West politically, economically, and militarily for the past 3 centuries, because few tolerant or secular Muslim democracies provide alternative models for the future, bin Laden's message finds receptive ears. It has attracted active support from thousands of disaffected young Muslims and resonates powerfully with a large, far larger number who do not actively support his methods. The resentment of America and the West is deep, even among leaders of relatively successful Muslim states. Tolerance, the rule of law, political and economic openness, the extension of greater opportunities to weapon. These cures must come from within Muslim societies themselves. The United States must support such developments. This process is likely to be measured in decades, not years. It is a process that will violently be opposed by Islamist terrorist organizations, both inside Muslim countries and in attacks on the United States and other Western nations. The United States finds itself caught up in a clash within a civilization. That clash arises from particular conditions in the Muslim world, conditions that spill over into expatriate Muslim communities in non-Muslim countries. Our enemy is twofold. Al Qaeda, a stateless network of terrorists that track us on 9/11, and a radical ideological movement in the Islamic world inspired in part by Al Qaeda, which has spawned terrorist groups and violence across the globe. The first enemy is weakened, but continues to pose a grave threat. The second enemy is gathering and will menace Americans and American interests long after Osama bin Laden and his cohorts are killed or captured. Thus, our strategy must match our means to 2 ends: dismantling the Al Qaeda network and prevailing in the long term over the ideology that gives rise to Islamist terrorism. Islam is not the enemy. It is not synonymous with terror, nor does Islam teach terror. America and its friends oppose a perversion of Islam, not the great world faith itself. Lives guided by religious faith, including literal beliefs in holy scriptures, are common to every religion and represent no threat to us. Other religions have experienced violent internal struggles. With so many diverse adherents, every major religion will spawn violent zealots. Yet understanding and tolerance among people of different faiths can and must prevail. The present transnational danger is Islamist terrorism. What is needed is a broad political military strategy that rests on a firm tripod of policies to 1. Attack terrorists and their organizations. 2. Prevent the continued growth of Islamist terrorism. 3. Protect against and prepare for terrorist attacks. Terrorism is a tactic used by individuals and organizations to kill and destroy. Our efforts should be directed at those individuals and organizations. Calling this struggle a war accurately describes the use of American and allied armed forces to find and destroy terrorist groups and their allies in the field, notably in Afghanistan. The language of war also evokes the mobilization for a national effort. Yet the strategy should be balanced. First phase of our post-9/11 efforts rightly included military action to topple the Taliban and pursue al-Qaeda. This work continues. A long-term success demands the rise of all elements of national power: diplomacy, intelligence, covert action, law enforcement, economic policy, foreign aid, public diplomacy, and homeland defense. If we favor one tool while neglecting others, we leave ourselves vulnerable and weaken our national effort. Certainly, strategy should include offensive operations to counter terrorism. Terrorists should no longer find safe haven where their organization can grow and flourish. America's strategy should be a coalition strategy that includes Muslim nations as partners in the development and implementation. Our efforts should be accompanied by a preventive strategy that is as much or more political as it is military. The strategy must focus clearly on the Arab and Muslim world in all its variety. Our strategy should also include defenses. America can be attacked in many ways and has many vulnerabilities. No defenses are perfect, but risks must be calculated. Hard choices must be made about allocating resources. Responsibilities for America's defense should be clearly defined. Planning does make a difference, identifying where a little money might have a large effect. Defenses also complicate the plans of attackers, increasing their risks of discovery and failure. Finally, the nation must prepare to deal with attacks that are not stopped. What should Americans expect from their government in the struggle against Islamist terrorism? The goals seem unlimited. Defeat terrorism anywhere in the world. But Americans must also be told to expect the worst. An attack is probably coming. It may be terrible. With such benchmarks, the justifications for action and spending seem limitless. Goals are good, yet effective public policy is also concrete objectives. Agencies need to be able to measure success. These measurements do not need to be quantitative. Government cannot measure success in the ways that private firms can. The targets should be specific enough so that reasonable observers in the White House, Congress, the media, or the general public could judge whether or not the objectives have been attained. Vague goals match an amorphous picture of the enemy. Al-Qaeda and its affiliates are popularly described as being all over the world, adaptable, resilient, needing little higher level organization and capable of anything. The American people are thus given the picture of an omnipotent, unslayable hydra of destruction. This image lowers expectations for government effectiveness. Should not lower them too far. Our report shows a determined and capable group of plotters, yet the group was fragile, dependent on a few key personalities and occasionally left vulnerable by the marginal, unstable people often attracted to such causes. The enemy made mistakes, like Khalid al-Midar's unauthorized departure from the United States that required him to enter the country again in July of 2001, or the selection of Zacharias Moussaoui, a participant, and Ramzi bin al-Shib's transfer of money to him. The U.S. government was not able to capitalize on those mistakes in time to prevent 9/11. We do not believe it is possible to defeat all terrorist attacks against Americans every time and everywhere. A president should tell the American people, 1, no president can promise that a catastrophic attack like that of 9/11 will not happen again. History has shown that even the most vigilant and expert agencies cannot always prevent determined suicidal attackers from reaching the target. 2, but the American people are entitled to expect their government to do its very best. They should expect that officials will have realistic objectives, clear guidance, and effective organization. They are entitled to see some standards for performance so they can judge, with the help of their elected representatives, whether the objectives are even being met.